Hi everybody and welcome back to Lost Genre Reddit Stories. This post is from the subreddit Am I the A-hole here, and it's by user Emotional Sepher. Am I the a-hole here for wanting separation and co-parenting instead of working on my marriage? When my husband, 29 male, and I, 27 female, decided to have a kid, I thought we had a happy marriage and a financial stable future. My pregnancy was high risk, and with the health complications, I was going to end up using a good chunk of my medical leave before the kid was born. So we together decided that I'd quit my job and be a stay-at-home mom for a few years and then go back into the workforce. After our son was born, I had postpartum depression and severe anxiety. I had complications in recovery and no help from family. I am low contact from my family, and my mother-in-law had passed away, and father-in-law had no interest in helping. My husband expected me to be a full-time housewife as soon as we got home with the baby and stopped helping with anything home or baby related because it was my job now. I was lucky to get involved with a moms group that helped me a lot because otherwise I was very lonely and stressed. When our son was 10 months old, I saw some messages on my husband's phone indicating that he was having an affair. I don't know when it started, but a lot of his late work was because of that. At that time, my mental health was not good and I became scared that he'd divorce me and take my baby. My reaction wasn't even anger at him, it was as if my love for him had disappeared and been replaced by abject fear. I didn't confront him, and he didn't realize that I knew. I ignored it and tried to deal with all my issues myself while living in constant fear of getting kicked out without my son. I know that wasn't a reasonable assumption and I have rights, but I can't explain why my head was stuck in that mode back then. I moved into my son's room and separated myself from my husband, but I kept on being a good stay-at-home mom. The sad thing is that he didn't even realize that I wasn't living in our room anymore. He got home-cooked meals, a clean house, and got to play with our son whenever he was home and didn't care about me at all. When our son was 2, I got a job and needed to put him in daycare. My husband was opposed to that because he liked how things were and wasn't willing to pay for it. I went ahead with getting employed, and the majority of my paycheck goes to pay for the daycare. The rest is my car payment and a very little bit for savings. Over the last few weeks, my husband has been home more and acting depressed, and I found out that his affair partner has dumped him. Now he's acting like the past 3 years were normal and wants intimacy and regular relations with me. I told him that our relationship was over when he stepped out of his marriage and he could start a different affair if the first one didn't pan out. He got angry because of that and accused me of being a cold-hearted gold digger. He put me through agony and hell, and I am here because I love my son and want to be with him every day, not 50% of custody, so I am dealing. But he believes he's the wronged party here. I have become accustomed to the situation, and I am okay with us living separately like roommates and raising our son. I don't care who he dates or loves or Fs. If things change down the line when my son is going to school and is less dependent on me, or if I fall in love with someone, then yeah, I'd file for divorce. Suppose he wants a divorce, that's okay too. I have consulted with a divorce lawyer already and I know I'll get half of the equity in our house, half of his 401k, and either child support or shared expenses into our son's needs. Living in this house with our son is more convenient for me right now. He is arguing that because I didn't say anything when I found out about the affair, I have no right to bring it up now that it's over. My parents agree with him and say that since I chose to ignore the affair, it has no bearing on our relationship now. My husband wants to go into marriage counseling, but I don't see the point in that. The only two options acceptable to me are the status quo as is now or divorce. Does that make me an a-hole? Well, OP, in my opinion, overall, no, I don't think you are the a-hole. However, I believe you're being an a-hole to yourself. Everything that you went through absolutely sucks. He cheated on you, you had PPD and anxiety, nobody to help you but a mom group. So yeah, these past 3 years have been hell for you, but you still want to stay in that environment where you live with this man who doesn't love you, is angry at you, and that's probably not a good thing for your son to see, much less an overall environment to live in. So I'd say if the only two options acceptable for you are status quo or divorce, ditch the first one and go for divorce. And also, your parents are effing ridiculous. Honestly, I wouldn't go low contact with them. I'd go absolutely no contact with them. That logic of, well, you didn't complain while I was having the affair, so now you don't get to complain? Come on, what are we talking about here? That is ridiculous. So yeah, OP, not the a-hole, get a divorce and move on. And what do you guys think about OP's situation? What would you do if you were in her shoes? Let me know in the comment section, and now let's move on to the community comments to see what they said. Glittering Job 7996 says, not the a-hole. Please divorce him. Him and your parents are a-holes. I can't believe your parents would want you to stay with someone who cheated. And OP responds, I am low contact with my parents because they are like this. He reached out to them and I know they are not right, but it's hard to ignore doubts. Would I be morally wrong if I stick around for another few years so I have 100% custody and also a comfortable living while my baby is so little? He is saying that me not confronting him about his affair and wanting to be a co-parent, not a wife, makes me a gold digger. Heather Reads Reddit says, not the a-hole. You have your boundaries and he doesn't want to respect them. Divorce him. You don't want your son to grow up thinking that how his father acts is okay. Children often model their parents' behavior. You don't want him to be a selfish taker, nor do you want him to fall in love with someone who will cheat on him and be selfish. Leave as soon as your good divorce attorney tells you to. Nervous T 7074 says, why did his affair partner dump him? Was it because he liked having his cake and eating it too? As in, he got sex and whatever with his affair partner, but came home to a tidy house, cooked meal, wife and child, family man image. So wasn't prepared to leave his image for his affair partner maybe? Still love the fact that he never apologized and took responsibility. For all those saying OP should divorce him, why? How long do you think it'll be till he finds someone else? Least then he's likely to move out and leave OP in the house. The fact that OP seems happier and more confident living this way is probably eating her husband up inside. He knows she doesn't need him. His ego is so damaged. But just remember to keep evidence of the affairs. Additional information from OP's comments. I have looked into divorce, but it's such a messy process and I don't even have enough time to sleep on top of the complication of finding another place to live. Right now, I have 100% custody of my baby since we are not divorced. I am not ready for him to be away from me half the time while he's still so young. If I leave right now, I'll be a struggling mother on my own with fewer resources for my kid and less time with him. It doesn't benefit me, I think. I also have to weigh leaving him against high rent prices and childcare costs. I feel that having access to a good school, a safe area close to work, and not worrying about rent increases gives me a much better chance of improving my career and being much more financially secure a few years from now. I am making 60% of what I was making before I quit my job. An office job in marketing was not lucrative, but I had a career. I'm struggling to crawl back into that same place. It'll take time for me to compensate for the gap in my resume. I have talked to different lawyers and have an estimate for a lawyer fee retainer and a range of how much this could cost me. It's a lot and I can't afford it while I'm paying for daycare. Once my son is old enough to be in school, then hopefully with a higher income, it is something I'll be able to do. However, if he does all the work, then I'll just sign the paperwork with my lawyer, of course. But starting it all myself feels daunting. I got dealt a crappy hand, by him by the way, and now I'm just playing it as best I can. So I ask those of you calling me selfish, are parents arguing the worst thing to happen to a child? Is everything else in the world just perfect and beautiful? Cost of living, safe, well-funded schools, good childcare, reliable supervision, stable housing, health insurance coverage, pediatric therapy, parents who can afford to spend more time with them. These things don't matter at all? What do you think divorce means? That the other party just disappears? Co-parents don't have conflicts and don't argue or fight? Will he no longer be influenced by his father anymore? Grow up. I have taken legal advice and there is no alimony in my state. The child support calculator has not caught up to the cost of living changes and inflation. I can get money in equity of the house and 401k split, but it is possible that he'll fight on that out of spite, and I may end up spending as much on lawyers fighting for it as I might get out of it, and even that will take 2 or more years to resolve. If I divorce, the amount of child support I can get will help with utilities and expenses, but only partially towards rent. I'll still need a job to afford housing and half of daycare. I'd love to go back to school, but I am not able to fund it with a baby in tow. Finally, I don't think he'd hurt me physically, but then I never imagined he'd cheat on me like this or abandon me after I gave birth. So what do I know? Alright, well, the community is deeming OP to not be the a-hole, and some people are urging her for divorce, and some people are saying stay with the status quo if benefits you best. And OP's analysis points her to the latter, and her whole analysis regarding her situation does make sense to me, but I still think that she should not be with him. It's not good for the kid. Of course, this is just me talking from over here and not experiencing OP's life. Still, what do you guys think about OP's argument? Does it change anything for you? Anyways, it's time to move on to the update to see how this story ends, but before that, if you're enjoying this video so far, go ahead and click that like button, leave a comment if you like, and of course, subscribe if you haven't done so yet. And now, let's move on to that update. We have been having non-stop arguments. I tried disengaging and grey rocking, but that didn't help. He swings between love bombing and being around all the time to yelling and raging at me. I agreed to couples counseling with the goal of having a better co-parenting arrangement. He told the counselor he still wanted the marriage to work out. We had some properly organized discussions, so that was useful. We were both asked to lay out our resentments. Mine was a years-long affair, obviously. I don't think anything beyond that needs to be said. But of course, there's the neglect, the lack of help, the absence from home, and that I have to pay for our son's daycare without any contribution from him. His list of resentments was a doozy. He says that I ruined his experience of becoming a father because I was difficult and neurotic. My painful pregnancy and medical complications were unnecessary drama to him. When we agreed that I'd be a stay-at-home mom till our son started school, he was envisioning a picture-perfect home with a beautiful wife and child who catered to him. He's upset the reality was nothing like that and is convinced that I tricked him. He's a selfish idiot, but he was also encouraged and enabled by people around him who talked this up, including my parents. I've always known my parents didn't love me much, but I have come to realize that they resent me and look down on me. Our counselor tried to put everything as a question instead of making statements. At one point, he asked him why he thought my mother, who only saw me twice throughout my pregnancy, had a better understanding of my medical needs than the OBGYN, who was treating me. He kept arguing that I was exaggerating the doctor's concerns, even though I had the printed notes of diagnosis and doctor's recommendations. He also knows my mother has always been dismissive of me, but still ran with it as, "See, even your mother thinks you were making things up." During the first year of our son's life, he was a bit sickly, preemie, and had acid reflux, so he was clingy to me. He resents me for that too. He thought the baby wanting to be with me and not reaching out for him was something I was training him to do. I followed a certain method to hold our son right after feedings to minimize discomfort from his GERD symptoms, and his dad just didn't. So obviously the baby wanted to be with me, the one giving him comfort, versus dad who wanted to bounce him and worsen his gastro pains. Now that our son's a healthy toddler who can run around and throw the ball, he's more interested in engaging with him. The whole thing was a pretty painful exercise for me. I restarted my own individual therapy. I had made myself numb to his actions and was ignoring issues to focus on my son, but my husband did a good job of opening up all the scabs. I also learned a lot more than I wanted to about his affair partner too. Now that I am physically recovered, have lost a lot of weight, ironically from stress, and look well put together, I am good enough to be his partner again. I'm struggling to understand how I didn't see any red flags before. We were pretty happy together before I got pregnant. He was a helpful, loving husband, very excited about becoming a father. Anyway, I've filed for divorce. I think it'll take a year and then some for it to go through. I'll stay here and not move out till we sell the house and divide the assets. Well, OP, of course I can't call this out as a happy update, but it is a positive one, I think, for you and your son. Hopefully the whole experience goes faster than you expect and you'll be in a better place soon. Take care, OP, and thank you for sharing. And now, let's finish this video with a mood booster post. This post is from the subreddit Malicious Compliance, and it's by user Mem1911. Some malicious forklift compliance. Years back, in my early days of employment, in early 2000, when I worked on the loading dock, we were expecting a big load of tech and products for the new office layout. Some fancy upgrades and big tech sending the latest computers and network equipment. Plenty of expensive equipment. And my boss told me to keep the trucks coming and going as smooth as possible. So we had the team on with a few extras. My responsibility was to get the unloaded pallets and stack them out of the way and ready for return to their owner. Company-owned pallets have to be returned. 6 a.m. I had my coffee, started the forklift, and got to stacking the CHEP pallets ready for collection. Around 8:30, one of the main representatives came in early and parked on the dock. This was a problem, as the trucks were scheduled for a roll-in at 9 a.m. I asked him to use the main car park. He told me to F off and do my job. My job was to make sure the trucks had unobstructed access to the loading dock. I interpreted this as, I am too important, put it somewhere for me. So, to keep from damaging the car too much, I slid a CHEP pallet under it and got to lift it. And I put the offending BMW on a stack of pallets, the entire time singing,
There is nothing like a crown for picking it up and putting it down.
The rest of the crew were in stitches laughing. Many of the trucks rolled up and they knew immediately that I was on duty. Those guys always had the best stories. Some of them had a good chuckle and made off with a fresh cup of coffee. The day was going smoothly and we worked that forklift dry. As the last pallet came off, the tank of the forklift emptied. And as I dropped off the last pallet, well, we got that unpacked and used a tug, a small electric cart puller, to drag the forklift out of the way. So I contacted the boss and told him to get me a payslip to go get the tank filled at the fuel station. He came down with the form and the representative was all smiles and thanked for the purchase of bulk computers and hardware, but that changed when he spotted his BMW. He was pissed and threatened my job. Demanded to my boss I get fired. I just looked at my boss and said, we should look at the security cameras. When my boss reviewed the footage, he pointed out that I did ask him to move and park elsewhere. He then looked at me and said, thanks for another day, see you tomorrow. The rep wanted the car down immediately. I said, we can't, the propane tank for the forklift is empty and gas delivery is tomorrow at 6 a.m. My boss handed me the payslip for refilling the forklift tank and he said to get the gas in the morning. The rep spat some more obscenities and said this would be tagged onto the bill if the car was damaged. He said it wouldn't take much more than a postage stamp to send his boss the footage of him obstructing their loading dock, and then my boss looked at him and tapped on the sign that said, this is a loading dock, park at own risk. We are not liable for towing or moving your vehicle. Fines apply. The next day, after detaching the tank from the forklift, I lugged that bugger to my car and drove off to get it filled. Upon returning with a charged tank of liquid work juice for the forklift, I started that bugger and got to moving the BMW down from its perch and ready for the rep to collect. So it was 6:30 a.m. and he had not arrived. So I decided to place this thing in the nearest accessible parking spot, on the street, a ticketed spot, as our car park was not open yet. It was the only safe place available. I contacted my boss and told him and said, call the rep, it's ready for collection. It's in spot XX on the parking meter line. He responded with an, okay. Then I got to work sending off the pallets for the day. It was a half-shift day for me. Now, as for Mr. Representative, he did manage to collect his car before it was ticketed for not feeding the meter, and I heard through my boss the rep got chewed out and screwed out of his sales bonus for acting like a douche. I miss that boss. Well, OP, your job was to man that forklift and he told you to do your job, so well done. Also, props to your boss for always having your back. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing, OP. And that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch it. Now, if you've gotten to this point in the video, I assume that you like these stories that I'm reading out, so here are a couple more that you might enjoy. And if you don't have any time to watch another story right now, save it for later, and also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.